Picture this. You're a warrior heading into battle, and the enemy's secret weapon isn't a sword, a spear, or even poison arrows, it's love letters. Yeah, you heard that right. While modern armies argue over drone technology, ancient civilizations were out here playing 4D chess with hearts, hormones, and honey traps. Today, we're diving into the twisted playbook of history's most romantically ruthless warriors, because apparently all is fair in love and war, and our ancestors took that memo very, very seriously. Number 1. The Seductive Spy Network. Long before James Bond made bedroom espionage look glamorous, ancient civilizations were perfecting the art of the honey trap. Tribes across Mesopotamia and ancient China developed elaborate networks of beautiful men and women whose job description basically read, seduce, extract secrets, destroy enemies from within. Think Tinder, but with actual life or death consequences. These weren't just pretty faces batting eyelashes. They were highly trained operatives who could make you fall head over heels while simultaneously planning your civilization's downfall. Shi, one of the 4 beauties of ancient China, was the honey trap in contention between kingdoms Wu and Ye, proving that sometimes the most dangerous weapon in a kingdom's arsenal wore silk instead of chainmail. The psychological warfare was next-level brilliant. What's harder to defend against than an enemy you actually want to let through your gates? These operatives didn't just steal military secrets, they shattered morale, created internal conflicts, and turned powerful leaders into lovesick puppies who trade state secrets for pillow talk. But if you think using love as bait was twisted, wait until you hear about tribes that literally weaponized wedding ceremonies. Number 2. The Poisoned Wedding Feast. Ancient Germanic and Celtic tribes turned the sacred act of marriage into the ultimate Trojan horse. Picture receiving a wedding invitation from your enemies. Sounds suspicious, right? Wrong. These invitations were often genuine peace offerings, complete with elaborate ceremonies, flowing wine, and what appeared to be the merger of 2 powerful families. The catch? The celebration was designed to be their last supper. The strategy was diabolically simple. Invite rival tribal leaders to witness a unity marriage, get everyone properly drunk and distracted by the romantic festivities, then systematically eliminate the opposition when their guard was down. It was like Red Wedding from Game of Thrones, except this actually happened throughout history, and nobody had dragons for backup. The psychological impact was devastating because it violated one of humanity's most sacred trusts, the safety of ceremonial gatherings. After news of poisoned wedding feasts spread, diplomatic marriages became fraught with paranoia, making genuine peace negotiations nearly impossible. Love literally became a weapon that could end bloodlines with a toast and a smile. Speaking of matrimonial mayhem, some tribes took the concept of battle of the sexes to terrifyingly literal extremes. Number 3. The Amazon mating ritual of death. The Amazon warriors didn't just fight like demons, they loved like them too. According to historical accounts, these fierce female warriors would capture male prisoners not for ransom or slavery, but for a breeding program that would make modern dating apps look wholesome. The twist? Survival wasn't guaranteed, and romance was definitely not part of the equation. The Amazons would keep male captives just long enough to ensure pregnancy, then, well, let's just say the ancient world's version of ghosting was significantly more permanent. They kept only the female offspring, either killing male babies or sending them back to their father's tribes if those tribes were lucky enough to still exist. This wasn't just about reproduction. It was psychological warfare on a generational scale. Enemy tribes lived in constant fear that their captured warriors were being used in this twisted reproductive lottery. The mere threat of this fate was enough to make some armies surrender rather than risk capture, giving the Amazons a strategic advantage that extended far beyond their battlefield prowess. But the Amazons weren't the only ones mixing romance with ruthlessness. Across the ancient world, love potions were getting a seriously dark upgrade. Number 4. The hallucinogenic honey trap. Sweet, delicious honey may seem like a strange ingredient for toxic warfare, but mad honey was and still is a potent poison. Ancient tribes discovered that honey made from certain flowers could cause hallucinations, madness, and even death. But here's where it gets really twisted. They didn't just use it as poison. They used it as the world's first date rape drug. Enemy commanders would receive gifts of this tainted honey, often delivered by attractive messengers who claimed it was a token of romantic interest from admiring locals. The victims would consume the honey, expecting a sweet treat, only to find themselves tripping harder than a college freshman at their first rave. While incapacitated, they'd be captured, interrogated, or worse. The beauty of mad honey was its plausible deniability. Honey was a prized commodity, so gifting it seemed like a genuine gesture of affection or diplomacy. By the time the effects kicked in, the perpetrators were long gone, and the victims were too busy hallucinating to mount any kind of defense. It was chemical warfare wrapped in a love letter, and it worked frighteningly well. If you thought drugged honey was bad, wait until you hear about the tribes that turned funeral rites into the ultimate romantic revenge story. Number 5. The Grief Widow's Infiltration. Ancient Celtic and Norse tribes developed a particularly chilling tradition, the Grief Widow's Infiltration. When a tribal leader was killed in battle, his widow would approach the enemy tribe under the guise of seeking protection or even remarriage. These women would play the part of the vulnerable, heartbroken widow to perfection, often spending months or even years gaining trust and access to their husband's killers. But revenge was always the endgame. These widows would systematically poison key leaders, sabotage weapons and food supplies, or coordinate with their original tribe for a devastating surprise attack from within. Some would even bear children with enemy leaders, only to eliminate them once their position was secure, raising their offspring as sleeper agents for future revenge. The psychological warfare was masterful. Who suspects a grieving woman seeking comfort? These widows exploited one of humanity's most basic instincts, the desire to protect and comfort those who are suffering. They turned compassion into a weakness and grief into a weapon that could topple entire kingdoms. But grief wasn't the only emotion ancient warriors weaponized. Some tribes discovered that jealousy could be even more destructive than any army. Number 6. Polygamous power play. Ancient Mongol and Central Asian tribes perfected the art of strategic polygamy as psychological warfare. Leaders would deliberately marry women from enemy tribes, not for love or alliance, but to create internal chaos and division. These marriages were designed to trigger jealousy, resentment, and power struggles within enemy leadership structures. The new wives, often planted as spies, would use their intimate access to manipulate their husbands' decisions, turn family members against each other, and gather intelligence about military plans. While their presence would create faction wars among existing wives, children, and advisors, effectively destroying the tribe's unity from within. The genius of this strategy was that it appeared to be standard diplomatic marriage practice, but it was actually a slow-acting poison for enemy societies. While the targeted tribe was busy dealing with internal drama and succession disputes, the orchestrating tribe could either attack their weakened enemies or simply watch them destroy themselves through infighting. Speaking of internal destruction, some ancient civilizations took emotional manipulation to levels that would make modern psychologists weep. Number 7. The false heir conspiracy. Perhaps no strategy was more diabolically patient than the false heir conspiracy employed by ancient Chinese kingdoms and Roman families. Spies would infiltrate enemy households as servants, concubines, or minor nobles, then spend years, sometimes decades, positioning themselves to bear children with key leaders or their heirs. These children would be raised as legitimate members of the family, while secretly being groomed as agents of their true loyalties. Imagine discovering that your beloved son or daughter, who you've raised for 20 years, has been programmed from birth to destroy everything you've built. The psychological devastation was often worse than military defeat. The strategy required incredible patience and planning, sometimes spanning multiple generations. But the payoff was enormous. When these sleeper agents finally activated, they had access to the most sensitive military secrets, family wealth, and political connections. They could orchestrate betrayals that would make Shakespearean tragedies look like children's bedtime stories. But even the most elaborate long-term conspiracies pale in comparison to tribes that turned the very act of falling in love into a death sentence. Number 8. The Cursed Romance Ritual. Ancient Shamatic tribes across Siberia and North America developed ritualistic love curses that were designed to psychologically destroy enemy leaders through supernatural manipulation. These weren't just superstitious mumbo-jumbo. They were sophisticated psychological warfare campaigns that combined theater, chemistry, and deep understanding of human psychology. The curse would begin when an enemy leader showed interest in someone from the cursing tribe. The shamans would perform elaborate rituals, complete with special potions, sacred objects, and dramatic proclamations that anyone who loved this person would suffer terrible fates. The cursed individual would then play their part, becoming increasingly distant, cold, or even hostile toward their admirer. The psychological impact was devastating because it attacked the victim's sense of reality and self-worth. Leaders who were used to getting what they wanted would become obsessed, making increasingly desperate attempts to win affection that was designed never to be given. This obsession would consume their time, energy, and decision-making ability, effectively neutralizing them as military threats without a single weapon being drawn. And if you think cursed romance was the pinnacle of psychological love warfare, you haven't met the tribes that turned burial grounds into dating sites of doom. Number 9. The Sacred Grove Seduction. Ancient Druid tribes and similar Celtic cultures developed perhaps the most macabre form of romantic warfare, seduction rituals performed in sacred burial grounds. They would lure enemy leaders to these holy sites under the pretense of spiritual courtship or seeking blessing for potential marriages, then trap them in elaborate psychological and physical snares. The sacred groves were designed to be both beautiful and terrifying, filled with bones of previous victims arranged in ritualistic patterns that would only become apparent once the victim was already deep within the site. The seduction would continue even as the target began to realize they were surrounded by death, creating a psychological horror experience that would break most people's minds. Those who survived these encounters would return to their tribes as broken, traumatized shells of their former selves, spreading terror and superstition that would make future diplomatic or military encounters nearly impossible. The Druids had essentially created haunted houses designed for warfare, using love and spiritual curiosity as bait for psychological destruction. But perhaps the most chilling strategy of all was reserved for tribes that understood love's greatest weakness. Number 10. The Children's Crusade of Hearts. The ultimate love warfare came from civilizations that kidnapped enemy children, raised them with care for years, then sent them back as emotional weapons. These children returned as beloved lost sons and daughters, carrying intelligence and psychological programming to destroy families from within. The returning children were genuinely loved by birth families, making eventual betrayal devastating when they revealed secrets or participated in attacks against blood relatives. The trauma of discovering your beloved child was actually a weapon often broke entire family lines. This exploited the strongest human emotion, parental love. Parents chose death rather than harm returned children, even knowing they worked for enemies. It was love weaponized in its most pure and terrible form. That's all for today. I'll be making more videos like this, so subscribe if you don't want to miss them.